of our speech to print book study. This chapter will be primarily focused on the sounds in speech and their individual characteristics. In chapter 1, we took a look at the research and how the brain interprets these skills and moves through those processes to learn to read, and how a language-based approach is the best format to approach that instruction, and those kind of elements that are needed. So now within this chapter, if we know that language is the foundation of how we should approach reading, let's learn more about that language and those key features that we need to bring to students' attention as they build those neurological pathways. As we go through, on the left side, I have our study guide that is there to help you through the chapter. We'll take a look at some of the questions, and if you have any questions outside of that study guide, please feel free to contact me or post them onto our discussion board, and we'll continue that conversation through those means. So let's dive right into our chapter goals in this chapter. So the first thing we're going to really focus on is defining a phoneme. What is it? What does it mean for us as educators? And then we're going to take a look at the difference between consonants and vowel phonemes, and we're going to explore and reproduce those characteristics through a phoneme chart. This first half of the chapter, we will be looking at consonants primarily. The second half of the chapter, we'll take a look at vowels. We are going to look at them in isolation and use some charts as reference because we want to reproduce those charts from memories. Those consonant charts and the vowel valley chart, those will become the foundations to your sound wall. And as we understand how those function, that will allow us to use them as tools for instruction and reference for our students and for ourselves in the classroom. We're going to go ahead and categorize them by specific features and define those so we can convey those to our students. And then we're going to talk briefly about this IPA system to transcribe phonemes and translating them and the need for those. We're not going to memorize the IPA alphabet, but we are going to talk about why it's there and what its importance is. We will primarily be working within the phonics symbols. And one of the last things that we're going to be doing in this chapter is we're going to analyze some spelling errors in student spelling tests. The event of writing out the spelling words and writing out these words that they're learning is a huge window into what is happening in their neurological processors in that language side of the brain. It gives us a tap into what are their hiccups, what are their stumbling blocks, what are they retaining, and what are they processing. So writing is such a wonderful avenue to be able to glean a lot of information about what's going on in the student's head. So let's go ahead and jump right into the vocabulary. Some of these vocabulary words that you see on the left will need to be written in a kid-friendly way. Some of the words you'll want the students to be able to say and use within their academic vocabulary so that they can attribute some of those characteristics. These first 5 are good things for you to know, but the students may or may not need to know them. After that, the stops, nasals, and fricatives, these ones we need to make sure the students know. So let's head over to affricates, glides, liquids, consonants, vowels, minimal pair, diphthongs, digraphs, lax vowels, tense vowels, arc-controlled vowels, schwa, articulation, voiced, and unvoiced. So if you need help with any of those, I've tried to put that into the presentation so you'll be able to grab some of those kid-friendly terms. During this chapter, we're also going to reference the Kidlip instructional guide and the Soundwall Solutions guide from Tools for Reading Along, as well as their Kidlip cards as tools that you can use to teach some of these concepts. Now, there's a lot of other options out there that are less expensive and they work just fine. The thing that that you need to look for is some very clear representations of what the mouth looks like and explanation of the articulation. And we'll get more into that as we go into the chapter. Okay, so what are phonemes? That's kind of our first question. Now I'm going to pause right now to see if I can get the sound to come up with these videos because they're just really short, fun ways to explain what a phoneme is and what a grapheme is.
People, even a lot of teachers we've worked with, as you know, will confuse the idea of a letter with the idea of a sound because we have a problem in English. We have 26 letters and 40 to 44 speech sounds to spell those. So, of course, you have to use letter combinations to spell some of them. And then we have several spellings for some sounds and several sounds for some spellings. So, if we count the number of sounds in shoe, there are two, sh and oo, even though they're 4 letters. Many adults, if I ask them to tell me the number of sounds in the word 6, will tell me that there are 3. They'll go s, I, x. But the way I count those sounds is s, I, k, s. And the way I would prove that is that sick has 3 sounds, s, I, k. And if you add a s onto the end of sick, you get 6. But it's confusing because we use 3 letters for 4 sounds. That's a revelation to a lot of people, but it's the most critical underlying skill that will help the children learn to read and spell.
All right, so hopefully
To help you a little bit with what is a phoneme. Really, basically, then, a phoneme is just a single solitary sound in our speech. We speak in articulated phonemes, all of the phonemes squished together, so sometimes it is hard for us to pick out individual phonemes. But we do so when we look at moving into attaching letters to them. So let's go back to this idea of co-articulation. Now, when we speak, we do not, oops, let me go back a little. We do not speak with every phoneme separated. I, d, u, n, a, t, sp, I, k, l, I, k, l, is. If we do, we sound like a skipping record, and it would take a very long time for us to have a full conversation. So we co-articulate all of those sounds together and squish them into whole units of words, and we squish those words together into sentences and sentences into phrases. Now, if you're like me, those phrases can get very long and very long-winded. But in a co-articulation, sometimes the sounds are squished together so quickly or blended together so well that they become a little bit obscure or elusive and hard to pull apart. Now let's try that a little bit. Let's take our practice book, page 27, and let's dive into exercise 1 and count some of those phonemes. We're going to write them with phonetic symbols. So you're going to do a slash mark around each sound to isolate which one you're talking about. So let's start with ace. A, s, that has two phonemes. Nose, n, o, z. Shoes should have three. Sh, oo, z. Try the next one. How many phonemes does though have? Did you say two? Nice job. Th, o. Now let's take chicks. This will refer to what Louisa was talking about earlier. Think about that one. Chicks. How many phonemes does it have? If you said four, you are correct. Ch, it, k, s. Nice job. So it's very understandable why some students might use an X there, because X is a k, s sound to it. Very interesting little insights as we look at student spelling. With quenched, you have six. K, w, e, n, ch, t. Those are all individual sounds. So I'm going to go through these a little bit quicker. I'll give you a couple seconds between each one to try them out and see how many sounds there actually are. Exit. Did you say five? What about way? There are two. Arched. Breath. Say. Zone. Couch. Ought. Hoax. There are four. Again, here's an occurrence of that X representing two sounds. Ledges. There are five. Hexed has five as well. Again, you have that X coming in with those two. Height. Did you say three? League. Did you say three as well? I always chuckle when I see the phonetic symbol of league because it looks like leg. You just have to remember this is the E sound, the long E. And the last one, earth. There are two. Now, as you look at that list, are there any words that surprised you? Are there any spelling patterns that were interesting when you look at the actual sound they represent and how many letters we use to represent those sounds? Now let's take a closer look at why those phonemes might be elusive in co-articulation. Does the phoneme t sound or feel the same or different in tag, stag, water, and past? What do you notice happened with those different t sound? Hold that thought and let's take a look at the k sound. What is the same or different here? Cat, scat, pinky, tack. Was anything slightly different with any of those sounds? What about the ah? Add and approve. Hopefully what you heard was a big difference with approve and pinky and water. There's a really big co-articulation mess up that happens with those words. Now you also might have heard a slight difference between tag and stag. The preparation of going into the next sound plays a role into what's happening to the previous sound, as well as where they came from to start with. So if I have the sound t and it's preceded by something in front of it, there could be some alterations that happen on your way to the sound. So take a look at these ones. Sometimes the vowel can also make a huge difference. Think about what is coming before each sound and after each sound. So when we say see, so, is there a slight difference? Desk, dress. Is there a difference in the d? Cheese, chose. Is there a difference in any of those sounds? Tap, trap. Is there a difference on the t? Zebra, zone. Is there a difference on the z or any of the other sounds? Me, moo. What about how the ends? Is there a difference there? So thinking about all of those words and how they're closely related as you're moving from sound to sound, what do you think causes the mouth position to change? You are right. So we're anticipating the sequence of sounds in the whole word. Our mouth, in preparations from d to actually passes through a whole nother shape of another sound. Watch your mouth go from d to and you'll notice that it passes through the shape of j, dir. And so what happens in our co-articulation, since we tend to be a little bit lazy in English, it doesn't want to necessarily switch off certain sounds and it starts to blend and sound like the j. We'll take a look at that when we look at the charts a little bit closer. So the implications of this is students will find certain sounds difficult. We will expect that there will be some combinations that will be confusing and that will be tricky. If we can focus them into the feel and the shape of their mouth, as well as where these sounds lie in relationship to each other, that will make it a lot easier for these students to not struggle with some of those tricky elusive phonemes. So let's move on to our questions in our study guide. So knowing all this, why do we start with speech sounds? And then take a look at page 27 where you are going to fill in the blank to teachers therefore should focus on what? Now if I go to page 27, I should find in the book where this phrase occurs. If you are looking for it, it will occur right at the top of the page. So teachers therefore should prepare to teach speech sound awareness to students by first learning the speech sound system, understanding why it is important, and how to teach within the context of structured literacy. Okay, so you had some practice to do this counting in your study guide as well. Hopefully you did a nice job. We can check that really quick if you'd like to. We have ice, which should be ice, 2, sigh, s, I, 2, day, d, a, should have 2, aid, a, d, should have 2, choose, ch, u, s, has 3, sing, s, I, ng, has 3. There's a lot of questions about the sing that I get from teachers. And sing has a slight I. When the I is being pulled into position into the will distort and pull the tongue back so it sounds more of an E. This is an example of that co-articulation mess up or mutation that happens. I like to tell the students that that sound is gonna mess with our and it stretches and makes it whiny into an ing. And if you watch what's happening inside your mouth and feel it, that's exactly what the sound is being pulled by your tongue up. It'll make a little bit more sense when we talk about the distinctive features of how vowels are created. But that's one way we can explain it to students is that it's going to mess with it and pull it back. So then thorn should be th or n. So there's 3. Quake, qu, ache has 3. Mix, it, has 4. Pitched, p, it, ch, t, has 4. If you notice there's a pattern we're kind of building here. Straight, s, t, eight has 5. Sh, is that zh is kind of hard not to say without the sound, but there's 4 there. Zh, That's a special sound that we don't have a clear representation from, that zh. It's the voiced version of the sh. Soothe, s, u, th, is 3. Her, has 2. Boy, oi has 2. And shout, sh, out has 3 sounds. Now, if it's still pretty tricky, I hope you watched this video connected to your digital study guide. It is really helpful in helping to really isolate some of those phonemes. Okay, so we know what happens in co-articulation now, and I think it's pretty explanatory why it's hard to isolate that phoneme. You see that occur here is because they are articulated, they tend, or co-articulated, they tend to influence each other. Think about sing. How many of you thought sing had an s, e, n, or you thought ing was its own phoneme? They are co-articulated so tightly that yes, it is sometimes very hard to pull them apart. So let's practice again by pulling apart these sounds and identifying the third phoneme. So we have music. M, y, u, s, I, k. Some of you may be asking about this u. Isn't that just a long u sound? Yes and no. I told you that phonemes were elusive. So what happens here is that U sound isn't a pure only sound. We do articulate them so closely together, we count it as one phoneme. Right now it's written as 2 because the M puts a little bit more emphasis on the U. And I think what Louisa was trying to do in this workbook is to overemphasize the fact that you do have a slight Y on that sound. So if I want to say the long U sound, it becomes U. And what? Feel your mouth. Your mouth starts in a Y position and flows right into the U. U. So if you think about this long U, it really is like an Y and an oo, and squishing them together so tightly we create its own unique phoneme of U. So she circled the long U, but wrote out this Y. Now, I would argue that if we were looking at it phonetically and how we teach it, we probably should have had M, U, S, and circled the S. I lost that argument when I talked to Louisa, but she said it does make sense why people would do that. Now, if we look at exhaust, again, we have a co-articulation emphasis of something weird happening, right? So normally this X should be a k, s, but what we see is a voiced version of those. E, g, z, a, s, t, exhaust. When we have a multisyllable word here that has an E to an unvoiced H, we actually lose the H sound, and this gets co-articulated with a voiced version of those same sounds. We have a voiced vowel in front and a voiced vowel sound after. We lose this unvoiced H. So the unvoiced version of this G is K, and the unvoiced version of the Z is a S. Which are the two sounds for X? K, S. When we have this occurrence, though, the voice gets turned on because we are a little lazy in English and we don't like to turn the voice off if we don't have to. It has now become exhaust, and you've turned the voice versions on. Your third phoneme is still as the Z sound, though. So now let's take a look at patched. P, at, ch, t. Your third phoneme should be that ch. And some of you might be wondering about that t sound at the end. The really fun spelling rule is that you will, or the phonetic rule, is if you're ending with an unvoiced ch, then your ed will also be unvoiced t. Now, if this ended in a voiced sound, such as buzz, buzz, z is a voiced sound, your voice is on, then your ed at the end for buzzed will be a d, the voiced version of the t. I know this sounds a little confusing right now, but I promise that the voiced and unvoiced and all of these connections of which one partners with which, it'll make sense when we get to the consonant chart. So I'm going to go through the rest of this pretty quickly. I want you guys to try to find the third phoneme before I reveal it. I'll give you a couple seconds. Are you ready? We have walked, Third phoneme, k. Good job. Psychic. There's the phonemes. Third one should be k. Good. You notice an interesting scenario here. We have the PS and just the sound and where that Y is being representing the I sound. We'll talk about that one a little later than the book too. Legion. Third phoneme is that J. Nice job. Squeeze. Third phoneme is the W. Did this one trip you up? You have S, K, W. Now there is some argument that the Q is the K, W, two phonemes just like the X. My argument is that you always have a U with the Q. So I would represent the Q as being the K and the U being the W. They always go together though. Extra. It's going to be that S part of the X. Good job. Things. Did the ing trip you up? Remember, there is an I there, so that sending your N sound back to the back of your throat, adding that right back there, that is your third phoneme. What about the word nod? Third phoneme should be the D sound. A lot of letters being used for not very many sounds in that word. Chosen. Good, it's the Z. And the last one, fusion. That's that special zh we talked about a little earlier. Okay, so how did you do? Was it a bigger challenge than you thought? You may need to have some practice picking out those phonemes, but once you start to practice it, it's pretty straightforward. So now let's talk about teaching that and where this phonemic awareness comes from. So here we had a chance of pulling out different phonemes. That's all part of this whole skill base called phonological or phonemic awareness. I've heard it referred to in both terms, phonemic awareness or phonological awareness. Now, phonological awareness is dealing with all the sounds and things they can hear and manipulating those in different skill base. Phonemic awareness might then focus on one specific phoneme. But each one wants the students to process through simple to complex tasks and get a really good foundation to working and manipulating those sounds. So the easiest of those skills is isolation, pulling a sound and isolating it. If I ask you for the first sound in top, hopefully what you can hear is t, t, and you can isolate that. But if I ask you to take these sounds and push them together, it would look like, what word can I make with k, at, t? You guys all say? Good, cat. Yep. So then segmentation, that was blending. Segmentation is then I give you the word and you can pull the sounds apart. So if I say the word fox, your answer would be, good job, f, a, k, s. 4 different phonemes there. Nice job. Now, addition of phonemes is starting in the more complex skills. This is the manipulation of the existing word. So we're going to add a phoneme somewhere, we're going to take away a phoneme in deletion, or we're going to substitute a phoneme. Now within this world, there is another layer of simple to complex. Just like here, you have simple to complex in isolation. And most all of them start with onset rhyme is easier, syllables are easier, first of the word is easier, then middle and end of the word gets harder. So within these realms, you do have a progression of easier isolation to harder isolation, or easier addition to harder addition. So addition might look like the easy side would look something like, please add sh to the front of elf. What do you get? Shelf. Nice job. Deletion would look something like, please take the word stop and remove the s. Yep, the word is top. Nice job. Then substitution, an easier version, again, is working with the front of the sound or the front of the word. So substitution might look something like, please take the word Sam and replace the s with a h, and you get ham. Nice job. So those are often assessed through things like a Haggerty assessment or phonological assessment. There's the Past by David Kirkpatrick. There's also several different versions that come from different curriculums and different researchers that are all really good ways just to tap into um, their students' ability to do these things. Now, little side note, this is where you're going to see your first indicators of dyslexia. We know dyslexia is founded in phonological awareness and phonological skills, and if students are struggling with some of these skills, you have a red flag that there's some dyslexia going on. So, what does this look like? A lot of different ways. This takes some of these big skills and breaks them down into further subsets. So let's take, isolation. Can they identify a rhyme? Can they produce alliteration? Can they distinguish between sound and words? Can they break things into syllables? Can they blend syllables? Can they manipulate? This is a really cool reference because it does break things down into more specific skills. But sometimes it's hard for us to then, okay, what comes first? What comes second? How do I develop into? That's where I would check out a developmental guide that I shared with you on the Google Drive that has the age of the child and when they should have certain phonological skills mastered. The other nice thing is some programs take care of this for you. If we're going to be teaching phonemes, we want to focus on the articulation. So this is where the kid lip cards come really well, and we want to hear them and watch their mouth produce it. And then we have things like Haggerty, which gives you a really nice, robust, routine, solid practice in all of these skills that progresses over time. And Haggerty has an early pre-K, kinder, first and second level, and now they have an extended primary level, which is 3, 4, 5, because these skills will continue to develop all the way up until age 9 and 10, which is 5th grade. Sadly, curriculums kick these skills out completely by the end of 2nd grade. You hardly see any phonological awareness practice in 3rd grade, and you really start to watch them disappear rapidly in 2nd. But the research tells us that's not okay. These skills are being developed up until they are 10 years old. So they need some of these harder ones, these more complex ones, in 5th grade. So that's something as we as master teachers need to make sure that we can correct. So let's take a little closer look at what Haggerty does and what some of these things show up in our curriculums. So Haggerty has the skills all along the side here, and it's that whole triangle again. You've got your rhyme recognition, your onset, your blending, your isolating, your segmenting, your deleting. It may not do all of the skills every day, but it will progressively bring in the next level of skill. So it is developmentally scaffolded to move them up. Now, on Monday, it has these little boxes that you go through and you say something, the students respond, and you do it together. This is all oral. They never see these words or these letters. All of this is done um, with sound and voice. This is building that phonological side, which is all about the sound. We do not want to introduce letters yet. So if I do an example, let's take this first one, which is rhyme recognition. I, the teacher, would say, boys and girls, I'm going to give you 2 words that rhyme, and I would like you to I'm going to say 3 words. I want you to pull out the 2 words that rhyme. So I would say rub, dub, cab. Students repeat, rub, dub, cab. Which words rhyme? Rub, dub. Boys and girls, your set is mud, bud, did. Say it. They say mud, bud, did. What words rhyme? Mud, bud. So they get a chance to just kind of do that routine and really, really nice practice of hearing it. Now, there are some hand signals that help with some of these, but those ones I'd have to show you in person. And sometimes they're just think about naturally how the sound comes together and see what your hands do to help show that the sounds come together, pull apart. I'll do another one. You have like the onset fluency. Say, I'm going to tell you a word. I'd like you to tell me the first sound you hear. Ostrich, they say ah. If I come down to adding a phoneme, I would say, boys and girls, I'm going to give you the part. I would like you to add a letter onto it, and you tell me the new word. So the word is ox. They say ox. Add a f, and it becomes, they say fox. So things like that. Now, within your curriculums, you usually do have some phonemic awareness activities. Most of the ones I've seen are really small. This is an example of a little tiny blurb that comes from Journeys. And this is a little blurb that comes from Wonders. It's a little bigger, and most of them revolve around just having some picture cards. Now, those are great to use in addition to, but they are not at all complete. They need more in order to develop those skills. So, if you are interested, I will be sharing this slideshow with you. Take a look at some of these videos that talk about that emphasis on phonological, looking at how does she actually make the sounds. And she talks about the importance of articulation. Louisa talks about the importance of the sounds and articulation. And then this is a teacher that you can watch actually doing Heggerty with her kindergarten class. So I'm going to go ahead and skip through those, but you guys can take a chance to watch those on your own. It's going to let me go ahead and advance. It may not. Let's go ahead and go next. Okay, so that is our introduction to phonemes. Let's take a look at our study guide and see if there's anything that we need to go into more. Okay, looks like the next step on our study guide was to take a look at consonants, which is exactly what we're coming up next. So now we know this idea of we need to teach phonological awareness in its full capacity and get them really strong on building up this muscle. We're going to now center in consonants and teach them all these features. Now we're going to have to tie in that phonological skill into these consonants within words, but I'll show you how that looks in with a lesson. Let's just learn about consonants right now. So, consonants. We need to know, what are they? What is articulation with those consonants, and what are the distinctive features? So first and foremost, we need to teach students what is the difference between a consonant and a vowel. And we really want them to understand this difference before they ever see a letter. There are no letters involved yet. This is all phonologically based. So what makes a consonant is we are going to partially close the mouth or restrict the airflow in some way with our lips, our teeth, or our tongue. That means if I'm producing a sound that is continuous and my tongue and teeth and lips really don't move, it's probably not a consonant. If I haven't messed with the sound or stopped it or added friction to it or restricted it, it's probably not a consonant. Now, that's kind of a complicated thought to try to explain to a kindergartner. So, an easy way to explain that to a kindergartner is to ask them, am I messing with the sound using my teeth, my lips, or my tongue? Am I messing with it? And if they can say yes, you teach them that's a consonant. Now, when we take a look at vowels, vowels are very open and vowels do not get obstructed. And we'll take a look about how to explain that in a little bit. And it'll make sense. I'll come back to consonants afterwards. It'll make sense how that distinction happens. So let's look at how that sound is messed with. What is the articulation that causes that sound to be restricted or messed with? Well, you've got 8 different locations that this could happen. And you have 3 different things that could be messing with it: your teeth, your lips, and your tongue. Now, you do not have to memorize these 8 positions if you do not want to. You can put them into kid-friendly terms, which I'm going to show you now. So the bilabial is involving your upper and your lower lip. So if we're going to mess with the sound with our lips by keeping our lips closed or popping them open, we would be working in this bilabial area. Now, the labiodental, or labiodental, however you want to pronounce that one, is going to deal with the teeth and the lips. If you can notice, dental is usually dealing with your teeth, and labio is going to be dealing with your lips. So if you're going to be using your teeth and your lips together, That's going to be one method of articulation. Now remember, articulation is how we're forming or making the sound, what parts of our mouth we're using to produce the sound. Now, interdental is going to deal with the teeth, and usually the tongue is involved because the tongue is in everything, really. But the teeth are the primary articulation places. Now, the alveolar ridge, which is that space right behind your upper teeth, that is going to work with the tongue, or your tongue's going to have placement there. That is another place of articulation. Now you can move further back to go to the alveopalatal, which is now pulling back to where your soft palate is and where your hard palate is. So your tongue's going to be messing around there. And then you have places like your velar, which is kind of close to the same place by your uvula. And then, of course, right back by your uvular. So 7 is going to be right back here. So you've got 5, well, 5, 6, 7 is all right back here in the back of your mouth. And then you have the glottal. And there's actually only one sound that is a pure glottal sound, and that is the H. It's just air coming out. All right. Now, the method of articulation is important. The type of sound is important. And then the voiced and unvoiced feature is important when it comes to consonants. Voiced simply means that you are turning your larynx on and you are sending vibration into your mouth or into your nasal cavity and producing the sound in assistance with your larynx. Unvoiced means that your larynx is off. You're just using air and movement within your mouth to produce the sound. So we teach students voiced and unvoiced by having them put their hand on their throat and feeling whether or not their throat is vibrating. If it is vibrating, the sound is voiced. If it is not, it is unvoiced. Try this out with P and B. Was it voiced or unvoiced? B, b, b. Was that voiced or unvoiced? If your voice box was on, remember it is voiced. So out of those two sounds, the P is unvoiced, the B is voiced. Okay, so here we have a chance to take a look at all this vocabulary. This is a good opportunity for you to go back to your study guide and go back to the vocabulary pages. Oops, let me go back a little bit more. And fill in these kid-friendly terms, the way that you can explain it to your students. Now, the ones that are down here, these small white ones, metalinguistic, co-articulated, continuant, obstruent, and sonorant, these ones you may not need to teach to your students. Phoneme, consonant, you probably do. These ones that are colored, you definitely do want to teach these to your students. All right, let's dive right in. So words that are spoken or sounds that are spoken together so that they separate segments cannot easily be detected, this is co-articulated. Remember we talked about how they're so squished together that we can't sometimes pull some of those sounds apart, or it is difficult to pull some of those sounds apart. That is co-articulated. A consonant speech sound that is articulated with a stop of the airstream, p, b, t, d, k, g. I argue is, but there actually is not, but I argue that it is. Those sounds explode out of your mouth. The air is stopped or the sound is stopped completely. So the term we use for that is a stop. These are stops. That's the type of sound they are. So a kid-friendly term definition might be you are stopping the sound altogether. You're blocking it. You're ending it. It stops. That one tends to be pretty easy for the kids to get. Something that you need to make sure that they are aware of and you're aware of is that these sounds are difficult to make in isolation. Take the B, for example. Most phonics programs and most teachers that you hear will say B or P, and they added a schwa, an after the sound. That is not the sound of the B. The B is a B, B, B. And even when I say it, you can still hear a slight at the end. Because of the nature of these sounds and how they are stops and the sound stops really quickly, they want to go right into the next sound and blend with it. And so the sound can continue or the word can continue. Think about black, brack, blade. That b, you can hear it really good, b, b, but it goes right to the eel. Bull, bull, bull. It's really hard. So it may be tricky for some of these stops to be distinguished because they do like to blend quickly to the next one. Make sure to point that out to students and help them to recognize that, yep, that's going to be a tricky one. Now, what is a phoneme that is formed with the obstruction of the flow of air with the teeth, lips, or tongue? There are 40 of them. These are consonants. Yep, we've got a lot of consonants. Speech sounds that can be spoken uninterrupted until we run out of breath, like s, v. These are continuants. They are an umbrella term that you can use for many of the different sounds in our language. They just continue. Next, we have a class of speech sounds that are articulated with a hiss or friction. These ones can continue. And so think of v, s, z, v. Those sounds are fricatives. You can actually see the word friction into them. The kids love to say this. What the fricative? It's kind of cute. So these ones cause friction. So if I was going to explain it to students, I'm going to have them rub their hands together and have them feel how that adds resistance and they can feel that restriction. That's friction, so they're going to be able to do that with the air or the sound. Sometimes they're vibrations. Chinese people do not like the V sound, because they don't like their um, bottom lip to vibrate. They don't like the TH sound either, because they don't like the vibration on their tongue. It doesn't exist in their language, so it's something that's unique to English. A consonant phoneme that glides immediately into a vowel is a glide. Think about the consonant w and y. Those are a lot like the B sound, where it wants to go right into the next letter preceding it, or the sound after it. That's what I needed to say. So the glide starts with a definite start and then opens into a very vowel-like. This is one of the reasons why they're almost called semi-vowels, because you'll see a lot of Y's and a lot of W's as part of the vowel sound. W, y. You'll notice your mouth starts a little closed and then opens. That's the glide into it. Speech sounds in which air is obstructed but not enough to cause friction. This is a liquid. Those are our two liquids. They mess the sound a lot, but it's not quite to start that vibration or to restrict it in that manner. These ones are the last sounds that students learn how to speak. The and the are two of the hardest sounds to say for students. And in some languages, they don't exist. Japanese have a really hard time saying It doesn't exist in their language, and so they turn it into an or wa. Okay? So there is no clear beginning and no stop. What I like to tell students on the liquids is that their tongue has twisted or kind of cupped in itself, and it's going to mutate the sound as it goes around. So now, anything pertaining to an acquired awareness of language structure and function that allows one to reflect on and consciously manipulate the language is thinking about your speaking. So if you remember any trainings about thinking about your thinking, or thinking about what happens to you processing information, is metacognition. This is metalinguistics. You're thinking about your speaking. Spoken with the airstream directed through the nasal cavity, we're going to be sending those voiced sounds up into our nose and out our nose. And so you cannot say them without your nose. So if you plug your nose, you won't be able to make the sound. Now, I've done this with students before with n, and ng. I've asked them to plug their nose and see if they make the sound, and some kid always says, I can make the sound. I say, yes, you're making a sound, but that is not the M. It's a different sound, because you cannot make these sounds if you plug your nose. These are nasals. So that's a really fun way to explain it to them, is that they resonate out your nose. If you plug your nose, you cannot make them. Now, it is very important to mention to students that these nasals will alter the previous sound from their purest form. And a lot of our alterations show up, or a lot of our elusiveness shows up with these nasals. Consonants that are produced with an obstruction of the airstream, these are obstruents. So if you think about fricatives and think about liquids, they have a little bit of an obstruent in there. and stops. Those would all fall into that category. So a speech sound that combines with others in a language to make words would be a phoneme. Remember, that's your individual speech sound. Speech sounds that are spoken with resonance and continuancy is a sonorant. It's some of those like ahs, or it could be the ols where it kind of goes into the middle of your mouth and it really kind of resonates and bounces around inside your mouth. It's a sonorant. Consonant phonemes articulated as a stop before a fricative. There's only two, ch and j. So they have a definite stop, but you can feel that friction. They're closely related to a fricative right around it. So that's an affricate. I would explain it to students by saying there's only two, and it has a definite stop where you release the air and friction, but it's going to feel like it has that vibration and friction like the fricatives did. Okay, so here is our chart that you guys are going to get to have to make fill out too. I gave you one in your study guide, but we're going to organize these consonants by how they're articulated, if you look at the top, and then type of sound it is. We just went through what a stop, a nasal, fricative, an affricate, glide, and a liquid were, and we've already talked about where things are produced, and so now we're going to fit the sounds into there. Now, the nice thing about your chart is you have empty blanks, so you kind of know where things are, you just don't know which sound's going to be there. Let's start with the stops straight across. These are the ones that kind of explode out of your mouth. If we have a voiced and unvoiced, I'm going to put the unvoiced on top and the voiced on bottom. So using just your lips, you have p and b. There's your unvoiced p and your voiced b. Moving down to placing our tongue right against the back of your top teeth, and you're going to hit it. The unvoiced version is t, and the voiced version is d. So these are made in the exact same way, but one has your voice off and one has your voice on. Now we're going to move our tongue back to the back of our throat, and you don't really feel it on the unvoiced version, but you can feel it in the voiced version. It actually hits the back of your palate where your hard palate is, that position 5. And when you do the voiced version, it feels like it's coming from your throat. And so there's this misconception that this voiced sound is actually a glottal sound, but it's not. You're hitting the top of your hard palate, but because it's so far back there, it feels like the vibrations go down to your throat. So the first unvoiced part of that is k, and the voiced is g. Now we're going to jump down to the nasals. So keeping your lips together and sending the sound to your nose, you're going to have the Your voice will be on for every single nasal. Now let's put our tongue back to the same position that the T and the D are at, and I want you to send the sound to your nose. You can leave your mouth open. You actually slightly put your tongue backwards, but you don't because that's an O, and you want to make sure it's just touching the back of your teeth. Is your nasal for that one. Now pull your tongue all the way back to where that G was, and now I want you to send that G sound into your nose. Your mouth has to open pretty wide in order to really hear that sound. That's your NG. All right, let's jump down to fricatives. We don't have any fricatives that have our lips together because we do have to restrict the sound but not stop it. So here we have our teeth. Should be teeth. This should be a picture of teeth. Sorry about that. Should be teeth on your lips and send an unvoiced sound. Now turn your voice on. You hear the vibration, you feel the vibration on your lips. Now, helping students to make the sound, make sure that it's just their teeth on their lips. Don't let their lips overlap their teeth or their tongue stick out at all. They should have their teeth on their bottom lip. Now, they often get confused and often struggle because of the next sound right next to it is you're going to stick your tongue between your teeth. And you have the voiced and unvoiced version. Now, students will try to swap these two. They'll try to stick their tongue out for the F sound, and they'll try to stick their teeth on their lips for the TH sound. That is a very clear distinction you need to help them to realize. You can do that by showing them a mirror as well, having them watch your mouth, watch examples, and then look at themselves in the mirror to see if their tongue and their teeth are doing what they should be doing. I often tease students when they're doing the F sound. I'll say, get that teeth on those lips, make a block, don't let that tongue escape. And so they have some fun with that one. Now, that same kind of trick comes into the next tricky sound that they have, which is the S and the Z. Those are the voiced and unvoiced versions. They will often try to put their tongue between their teeth in order to make the S sound. That is putting you must put your tongue behind your teeth. You can set it up there on the top of the ridge if you would like to. It doesn't do any harm to it. We just need your teeth to be shut and your S to be made without your tongue escaping, so your teeth are together. Just turning on your voice makes it the Z. Now, next one is pulling your tongue back and rounding your lips. Shh. I like to tell the students, I want you to stick your lips out like you're kissing your mama, and then keep your teeth together and pull your tongue back and shh. And they get that one pretty well. Now, adding the voice can be tricky because the articulation is the same, but they're going to feel that vibration come up to their teeth, and they might feel their teeth rattle a little bit. Now, the H is air produced out of your throat, and you just push it out. Now, this can be a continuant, but we usually never use the H as that long, extended sound out because that's just releasing air. So I like to think of it more of an affricate where it has a definite stop, but it still falls within that friction of just releasing air from the back of your throat. Mouth is just open, tongue's relaxed. You can have your tongue really anywhere for that one. It just changes the sound a little bit, but it's still a I know I laugh about the H all the time. So now let's go to an affricate. An affricate is going to have the similar articulation as the SH. You're going to keep your lips out in a rounded form, and you're going to add your voice or unvoice, and you're going to add a stop. So the biggest difference is you're adding a stop to it. Shh is extended. That's a fricative. Once I add a stop to it by hitting my tongue against the back of my teeth, ch, ch, then you have your CH. Now adding your voice, j, j, is the J for that. Okay, so the way to help students with that is SH is longer and unstopped. As soon as you hit your tongue against the back of your teeth, you've made an affricate, which is a ch, and it's a different sound. Okay, we already talked a little bit about the glides. The W has your lips really close together in a very tight circle, and then you open it. Now, you also see the WH on here. In American English, we do not have that sound anymore. That is why it's a different color. In British English and Australian English, they still have that onto that. And what it does is it opens up that W to make more of that British accent that we hear like wah, wah, wander, water. We don't do that anymore. We've eliminated that H on the end, and so we just have the W. We've kept the spelling, and we'll talk about that when I get to chapter 3. Now, the Y is the only other glide we have, and that one you just pull your tongue back, but your mouth still drops open. Yeah. And then you have the two liquids. Now, the liquids, and you have the tongue right up behind the the back of the teeth, and you are bending it so you see the underside. So you're going to make your tongue into a backwards C shape, and you're going to press against the top of your front teeth. That takes the sound around and resonates into your cheeks a little bit, and that's what makes that sound and kind of distorts it. Now, if you want to make the R sound, you're going to pull your tongue back, and you almost have you don't want to have your sides of your tongue hitting the sides of your teeth because that's now a different sound. That's a vowel sound. This one has to be really tight in the middle. Like rooster, You're not going to let your tongue flail out and spread. Again, this is why R is one of the hardest sounds for kids to make. Okay, so that is the consonant chart. I hope you're able to fill that out. I'm going to pause the video here because next we'll be talking about the vowel valley. Um, and I want to save that for another half because this has gotten pretty long as it is. Before we do that, I would like to go ahead and take a look at just the IPA format stuff and why it's needed. So we know that there are some different symbols for each one of the sounds. We just looked at the consonant chart and we know that this is the th and the th, and this is the sh and the ch. But if you notice, the symbol is completely different. And the reason why they do that is because we do have multiple sound or multiple letters in the English language to represent certain sounds. And so to avoid confusion, they have just created a whole different symbol. When you have this written out into words, it's actually like learning a whole new language. So it's kind of fun to see, but it's not something you guys are going to have to memorize. So this activity on exercise 4 of one of your assignments was to emphasize that, to look at, wow, these are all the different representations for the k sound. These are all the different graphemes or letters we can use for the oo sound. So to avoid that, when you're talking about international or you're working with people who are learning the language for the first time from a college level, you have the IPA for transcription. So they know that this is the sound and they're going to learn to speak it. They have to still learn the spelling patterns if they're going to read and write it, but just to learn to speak it, they use the IPA transcription. Okay? All right, so there's an example of what you would put up on your wall for the consonant chart or the sound wall to help students. And exercise 5, let's take a look at some of these phonemes. So if you want to circle the speech sound that you can say continuously until you run out of breath, you should have circled these ones. Now, what about those speech sounds that you're going to send through your nose, those nasals? Yep, those are them. Now, what about those unvoiced ones where the vocal cords are turned off? Which one of these sounds would be the unvoiced versions? Yep, those are them. Nice job. So exercise 6, 7, 8, and 9 in your practice book is just more practice in consonants. So we're going to pause there, let you digest consonants, and then I'll see you again for vowels.